Hello and welcome back. So here is my electric bike with a new display installed, and I was hoping to show you the old display and what happened to it, but now it appears to have died completely. If I power it up, I'm running it on this power supply on 29 volts, and let's turn it on. Nothing except a backlight. So I installed the new display about 3 days ago because this one was getting more and more unreliable. It started several weeks ago. It's a long story, this. Several weeks ago I was coming back from roughly 24-mile ride, and I noticed something was peculiar with the display. I'll show you. I can't show you now because it's completely died on the actual display, but I did take a photograph of it. I'll just go and get my phone. So here we are. That's the new one, obviously, on the right, and it's a fair bit bigger than the old one. Also probably a bit clearer on the digits. But this is what happened. That's the speed. This is a bit of wire, by the way. I couldn't find anything better to point with. But that's the speed display on top. And on that one, it's at rest, 0.0. So on this one, the original display, I've lost some of the segments on that left-hand digit. That was my first problem with the display. I could live with that. It was irritating, and ignore the E10. All that means is it's, when I've disconnected it, which I did, it no longer has communication with the controller. You know, so that's a communication data problem, error code. So that was what I had, and I had to live with that for a while. And every time you go above 10 miles an hour, it would look like you were doing 2 miles an hour when you were actually doing 12 miles an hour, because I'd lost some of my segments. So I managed with that for a while, and enough of that picture, I think. Then what did I do? I contacted the company that make the bike. Turn this off now, don't need this anymore. Yeah, I contacted the Chinese manufacturer, Hyuhome, and I've always found them very good and very responsive to messages. And sure enough, within a few hours I had a message back from them. What I was asking was, can I buy a new display from you, and how much it would be. This display is called an M3 display. I looked on eBay. In fact, I searched exhaustively. I couldn't find any M3 displays from anywhere. The new display is called an M5 display. I guess it's a slight improvement. I said, can I buy an M3 display? And I explained what the problem was, sending them photographs. They said, oh no, we don't do those displays anymore. We use the M5 display. We can sell you one of those for £35. Well, that's all very well, but after VAT and import duty and all the other nonsense, it's going to be more like 50, isn't it? I'd already looked on eBay and discovered the M5 displays were available. And I found that one there, for £23. That was more or less the cheapest I could find. And that was supposed to be for a new, kind of second hand. I mean, it hadn't been used, he said in the description. It had just been bought and never used. And I don't know if it's visible, but there are a couple of chips along the top here. So I bought that one for £23, not knowing if I was doing the right thing or not, or whether it would work with my bike or not. As this display was going faulty, that brings me on to further in the story, because the initial problem was those missing segments. I could live with that. Then a few weeks later, I went to use it, got it outside the garage door, the bike, and I'd already turned it on, but the display was off. I thought, that's a bit strange. Took it back in the garage, turned the power off, turned it back on again. Display came on. So, wondering if I was doing the right thing, I set off down to the local shop, which is 1.5 miles, contemplating being stranded with a heavy bike. Well, the display flickered and went off a couple of times on that journey. But even when it was off, the bike still worked completely as normal. You know, you could pedal it and the motor would kick in as it normally did. But you couldn't tell what you were doing. You couldn't see your speed. You couldn't tell which power assist level you're in. I'm in level 1 there. Normally run it in 3 or 4. So I had no idea what that was set to. I had no idea what voltage I had on the battery. No idea what distance I'd done. Nothing. But that continued for a while, and it would work intermittently, and it would turn off intermittently. And then one day, it failed for the complete journey down to the supermarket. But I managed to get it going again by turning the power off and on. And that was a week or so ago. So I knew that the old display was on its way out, but that was when I had to face up to the reality of installing the new one, with much anxiety and trepidation, having not done something like this before, and also not knowing if the wires inside the cable would be the same colours. Now, that brings me on to something else. Let me go and get something. Right, this is what I got with it. I got a little manual, which is always helpful. And I've got all the colours for the wires and what they do. So, that's very helpful. And also, which is something that you're definitely going to need here, is all the settings, because you can get into the sub-menu on the display, and there's, on the old display there was 17 settings. The new one has got bloody 20 of them, so 3 more. More anxiety, wondering what they do. Right, so some of these settings are very important. If you get them wrong, you screw a lot of things up, and I don't know, you could potentially damage the motor. So what I did in preparation, I copied them all out from the old display while it was still working. For instance, number 1 is display brightness, 3 levels on the old display. I only need it on level 1 on the new one because it's a lot brighter. I won't go through all these. Number 3 is the battery voltage, 36 volt in this case. But and other things like the wheel diameter are important to get the right speed measurement. 25.3 I measured on my wheel. But on the new one we have from 17 onwards, I think, which makes no sense to me whatsoever. 0 equals no enable cruising, 1 equals enable cruising. I tried it in both of those and it's gone back to 0 and it's working. Display speed ratio adjustment, I think that just alters the accuracy of your speed and distance. Other stuff, 19 0 power bit equals 0 file, 1 does not include 0 file, don't have a clue, left it as it was in default. Then we got protocols, don't understand that either, it's set to the original default. And I had to program a lot of these from the old settings because although some of them were okay, like the voltage, others were not. So you got to be careful when you transplant the display. Not sure what else to say at the moment. The only thing I don't like, although I do like some of the things on the new display, I mean I never really take much notice of the energy bar on the old one. Well, on the old one I also had a constant display of battery voltage, which gave me more of an idea of how much distance range I had left. On this one you don't have that. You have to go into a sub-menu on the bottom display. Normally that defaults to odometer, and that's another problem. But then you can cycle through trip distance, voltage, you see. Normally I would have had that continuously before. And current. Current is a fascinating one. I've never known before how much current I was using. So when I tested this out a couple of days ago, rode up the hill, the steepest part of the hill to my house, and I was peaking at 14 amps, would you believe? Hell of a lot of current. But that's only on really steep hills. It's normally ticking along around, I don't know, 5 to 8 amps, something like that. So that's interesting, but I would still prefer if I had the old one with the voltage on there. And as I was saying, of course, having replaced the display, I'd achieved just over 2,900 miles on my old odometer on the old one. Now I'm back to 0. Well, I was. That's what I've done since installing it, 35 miles. That's really annoying. But there's not a lot I can do about it, I don't think. There may be ways around that. I'll have to think about that one. I'm getting a bit ahead of myself now. And of course I should have filmed the installation, but I was in too much of a anxious state when I was doing it. And also, it was very hard, because I was backwards and forwards, different parts of the bike to the bench. And it would have taken me twice as long to do the job, which, as it happened, took nearly 2 hours to install. And I would have filmed it all if I'd had a cameraman, or even better, a camera woman. But I haven't got such luxuries. So unfortunately I couldn't film the actual installation, which I'll get onto next, I think. Okay, well, it's get on to how I did the installation then. Ideally I would have filmed it all, but as it was, it took me nearly 2 hours to get the new display installed, and I was backwards and forwards, over here, over there, to the bench, whatever, and very hard it would have been on my own. If I'd had a cameraman, or even better still, camera woman, that would have made things a lot easier to film. But it took, as I said, nearly 2 hours, and it would have doubled the installation time, I think, messing around with a camera at the same time. But all the wires from all the various things up here go into this loom, this coily loom, and they come down here and they go into the frame at this end. How they ever got this through that down there, I don't know. And they emerge down the bottom. Then they go to the control box, which is this black thing. That's just a cover. There's a metal box inside there. So, back to the display cable. What I had to do, because there's no plugs and sockets, I had to cut it with great anxiety. You can see where I've joined the new one on with a bit of yellow heat shrink to cover it all up and make it fairly waterproof, I hope. So now I was hoping and praying that all the colours for the individual wires, and remember there's 5 on the new display, 5 individual wires, would be the same as the wires on the old display. So there I am. I cut the cable and strip it back, and bugger me, the old display has 7 individual wires, 5 of which are the same colour as the new one, and 2 extra wires that the new one does not have. And I think it shows a picture of that somewhere. Maybe it does. Yeah, it does. It tells you the colours of the wires and what they do. Some of which I don't understand. I mean, there's obviously serial data receive and serial data transmit. But there's also 2 power wires, which I didn't quite understand, but I managed to work out which one made the display work while I was testing it. Because I tested this display just using a power supply and programmed it before installing it. So where have I got to? So I've got 7 wires on the old cable, and only 5. That almost unhinged me, that did. I thought, well, what am I going to do? So, open this box up. That was the only thing to do, really. And 5 of the wires go into the control module inside, which is like an aluminium box. Quite small, actually, considering all those amps it's got to process. And 2 of the wires, the spare ones, which I didn't have on the new display, 2 of those connected straight to another cable that goes straight back there again, and probably almost certainly ends up here. I'm 99% convinced, therefore, the lights, those 2 spare ones. And that's confirmed because you enable the light by pressing and holding the up button, and you get a light symbol, headlight, but of course nothing on here. Okay, I understand now. They're doing it in data. They're sending a data command on this one to the control box, and that is then turning the light on, rather than sending a voltage out. And I confirmed it on this one while it was still working, that the two extra wires, which I believe is brown and white, when you enable the light you get full supply voltage on there, and I don't think it's current limited for the LEDs inside. I'm pretty sure, having taken this apart earlier today, I can't get it apart now. Yes, I can. If I take this apart, it's a bit how you doing all this. You know, it's a bit dodgy because it's not fixed very well. Hang on, I'll get this off. Oh yeah, I nearly forgot to say, before I did any wire cutting or even thought about doing it, of course I removed the battery. There's a hell of a lot of energy in that battery. You could have a severe problem if something shorted out. That would certainly ruin your day and possibly ruin your life, with all the energy that battery's got and the potential current it can deliver. So I removed the battery, and then I did all my wiring, and initially I had it roughly connected and not heat shrinked or anything like that, but the wires were all well separated so nothing could short out. And I wasn't going to risk trying it with the battery. So what I did was connected my power supply, which is capable of 32 volts, which is just above, well, the cutout voltage is set to 29 on this. So when your battery goes below 29, it will cut everything off. All your power gets cut off, and okay, 32 volts, I've seen that before. I've seen the voltage go down that far, so I knew it would work, no problem. And I had it set to about 3 amp current limit, which is fair enough, and then powered it off that to test it. And that's how I initially confirmed that everything was wired up and working properly. Then finished the job off, heat shrinked it all, and checked everything thoroughly and reinstalled the battery. And of course it worked fine. But I can't stress highly enough how important it is, if you're working on something like that, that you're very careful with all that power that's available in that battery. And of course, before I could do any testing, you have to get the back wheel off the ground. So this is what this contraption is. It's a hook. As you can see, the back wheel is suspended because the motor's in the back wheel. I had to install this. It goes up to a beam so you can hang it. And then if it doesn't work, you can also use it to hang yourself afterwards. And to keep it all stable, the good old Black & Decker Workmate clamps the front wheel, otherwise the whole thing will fall over. And I've got another one up there, which I've used before when I've been adjusting gears and whatever, but I needed to put a new one near the power supply rather than drag the power supply over to wherever. Anyway, that worked quite successfully. So you take the lens off, which isn't fixed. They're supposed to sit on the individual LEDs. That will be addressed at some point. But we've got all this nonsense going on inside here, which I suspect is current limiting. Seems a hell of a lot. You could do all that with a resistor, but whatever, it's probably more efficient to do it like this. And this board is not even fixed properly. There goes the bezel. That may need to be addressed, and it's got heatsink paste on the back of it. But I really like those to line up properly. Maybe by gluing them. I don't know yet. I haven't got to the point of trying to get the light to work. I mean, I rarely use the light. I've owned the bike 3 years in September, and I think I've used the light 3 times, but it's always good to have something like that, because you never know. I mean, I have been caught out in rain when it's got very dark. Once I got caught out like that. So I'm going to address that. And what I'm going to do is, I'm going to get back in that box there. Get back in there. It comes apart fairly easily. You just unscrew these clamps, and then the whole thing comes off. And then there's some more screws to take it apart. Then you get access to all the cables, and of course the control box is in them. So what I'm going to do, well, I'm going to hardwire the light. It's not difficult. Well, assuming that that's the current limiting in that circuitry, which I shall test. I haven't got around to that yet, because I don't want to take this box apart unnecessarily. But what I've done is I've just ordered a rocker switch, an ordinary little rocker switch, and I'm going to stick it up on there, on the top. It'd be fairly easy to turn it on and off. As I rarely get the bike wet, I don't anticipate too much trouble with the switch, and even if there is, I can always replace it. I'm still just waiting for the switch to come. And then there's loads of room. The actual box, control box, is only about that long. So there's loads of space in there. Making sure all the terminals are well heat shrinked. I'll probably do a video on installing that and testing the light. So that's where I got to, really. I tested this now, this new display, 35 miles worth of testing, and everything seems to be going very well. Initially I was getting, I think, an under reading on the mileage, but I've adjusted that and I think I'm near perfect. And I've been out today on it. I've done 14 miles today. Not a massive amount of miles, you might think, but I went up some very steep hills and some very deep valleys in the process, so quite an arduous ride. And everything's performing perfectly. And I do like the fact that it's bigger and clearer, this one. So that is really there isn't much more to say, I don't think. Oh yeah, one minor problem. This bike is supposed to have a walk mode. In other words, you hold this button down and it tells the bike to drive itself along at 3 miles an hour. And I used that, I think, once only in nearly 3 years, because in other words, you can walk alongside the bike and it pulls itself along at 3 miles an hour walking speed. This does not work anymore on this one. If I enable walk mode, it tries to start and then it dies. So I've no idea what the problem is with that, but it's the least of my worries. The main thing is I now have a working bike and a working display. I just kind of think what normal people would do in circumstances like this. They have no knowledge of electronics. Take it to a bike shop. They wouldn't have a clue. They're more mechanical than electronic people. Just don't know what you do with it. But I'm pretty pleased that I've managed to do what I've done. Let's just try this once more before I finish. Don't think it's going to work anymore. No, dead as a dead dingo's donga, as Dave would say. So just in time I got it replaced. Sorry if the audio is a bit poor. I'm on a tight clip microphone which keeps getting brushed. I also think it might be slightly too loud, but whatever. I don't think there's much more to say really, but I will do another video when I get that rocker switch about installing that to see if we can get the front light working, headlight working. Okay, thanks for watching, bye for now.